My wife cheated on me with a millionaire CEO for 1 year. My kids abandoned me and chose him as their father. But 8 years later, he lost everything. And they all came back begging for my money. What I did left them broken. I'm 50 years old. I work in tech consulting. Well, I actually own my own company now, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened like 8 years ago basically destroyed my family, or what I thought was my family. The thing is that after 25 years of marriage, I discovered my wife was cheating on me with some rich guy. And when I say everything went to hell, I mean I literally lost my wife, my 2 kids, my house, everything I had built over a quarter century. But you know what? In the end, it turned out to be the best shit that could have happened to me, though obviously I didn't see it that way at the time. I guess I should start at the beginning, when everything still seemed normal. Helen and I got married when we were young. Like I was 25 and she was 23. And honestly, they were good years. Or so I thought. We had 2 kids, Kevin, who's now 27, and Brittany, who's 25, and I worked as an IT manager at a mid-sized company, while Helen managed the house after leaving her. Office manager job when Kevin was born. We weren't rich, but we were doing well. You know, we had a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 cars. We could pay for the kids' colleges without getting too deep in debt. I worked like crazy, though, because I always thought it was my responsibility to provide for the family, and Helen seemed happy with that arrangement. The kids grew up, graduated, got jobs, and I thought we were finally going to be able to enjoy that stage where you don't have to worry so much about the children anymore and can focus on your marriage again. But turns out that while I was working 60 hours a week to maintain our lifestyle, Helen was bored, or unsatisfied, or whatever led her to do what she did. I started noticing weird things like 6 months before everything exploded. She was going out more often, always with excuses about going to the gym or getting coffee with friends, and suddenly, she bought new clothes, started wearing more makeup, things like that, which at the moment didn't seem so suspicious, but looking back, I mean, all the signs were there. She was also more distant with me. We didn't talk like before, and when I tried to have normal conversations, she was always distracted with her phone. I'd ask her if everything was okay, and she'd tell me yes, that she was just tired or stressed. And I, like an idiot, believed her because after 25 years, you're supposedly supposed to trust your partner, right? The day I discovered everything was a Wednesday. I remember it perfectly because I had an important meeting at the office, but it got canceled at the last minute. I got home around 3 in the afternoon, much earlier than normal, and Helen wasn't there. Her car wasn't in the driveway and she hadn't said anything about going out. I sent her a message asking where she was, and she responded like 20 minutes later, saying she was doing some shopping. Something about that response made me feel weird. I don't know. Like a feeling in my stomach that something didn't add up. So, I did something I had never done in 25 years of marriage. I grabbed the keys and went out to look for her. It was like my body knew something my brain still didn't want to accept. I found her like half an hour later at a coffee shop on the other side of town, sitting at a table in the back with a guy I had never seen before. And it wasn't the kind of casual meeting with a friend. You know, it was obvious from the body language that there was something more. She was laughing, touching his arm, leaning toward him in that way she used to do with me when we were dating. I stayed in my car watching them like a stalker for almost an hour, and every minute that passed I felt sicker. When they finally left the cafe, they walked to the parking lot and got in the same car, a shiny black BMW that clearly wasn't Helen's. I followed them, and believe me, I know how pathetic all this sounds, but I needed to confirm what I already knew deep down. They went to a hotel. A decent hotel. Not one of those cheap roadside motels, but one of those places where the night costs like $300. I watched them go in together, him with his hand on her lower back in a way that made me want to throw up. I sat in my car in that parking lot for I don't know how long, literally shaking with rage and sadness and 1,000 emotions I couldn't even process. After a while, I just started the car and left. I didn't go home. I couldn't. So I drove around the city aimlessly until it got dark. I finally parked in a parking lot and just sat there until like 11 at night, trying to decide what to do. When I got home, Helen was already there, acting like nothing had happened. She asked me what I had for dinner and I said I wasn't hungry. I went straight to the guest room, packed a suitcase with clothes for several days, and when I came downstairs, she was in the living room, looking at me with a confused face. "Where are you going?" she asked me. And I just told her, "I know what you did today. I know who you were with." I watched her face change from confusion to panic, and then to something that looked like anger, as if I was the one who had done something wrong by catching her. She didn't try to deny it. I'll give her that at least, but she didn't seem particularly sorry either. She just asked me how I knew, and I told her that didn't matter, that the important thing was that our marriage was over. I left that night and stayed at a hotel. Not the same one where she had been with that guy, obviously. And the next morning I called a divorce attorney. The conversation where Helen finally admitted everything was like 2 days later. We met at a restaurant because I didn't want to be alone with her in the house, and she basically confirmed that she had been seeing this guy. Lawrence was his name. For over a year. A whole year. Can you believe it? And during all that time, I was working like a mule to support her while she was rolling around, with some rich CEO who owned I don't know what landscaping company or something like that. I asked her why, not because I really expected an answer that made sense, but because I needed to hear it from her. She said something about feeling lonely, about me never being home, about Lawrence making her feel special and valued. All those typical excuses people use when they know they screwed everything up, but don't want to admit they were just selfish and didn't care about destroying everything. What hurt me most was that she didn't even look sorry. She actually seemed annoyed that I had caught her and ruined her plans, whatever those were. The divorce process was relatively quick because I just wanted to end everything and move on. I didn't fight for the house. I didn't fight for most things. I just wanted my freedom and to start over. But honestly, the most painful thing wasn't losing Helen, because by that point I had already realized that the woman I married probably never existed or had stopped existing a long time ago. The most painful thing was what happened with my kids. I told Kevin and Brittany about the divorce like a week after discovering everything. I invited both of them to dinner, thinking that as adults, they could understand the situation without taking sides. Kevin was like 19 years old at that time, and Brittany was 17. They weren't little kids anymore who needed me to explain things delicately. I told them directly that their mother had had an affair for over a year, that I had discovered her, and that we were getting divorced. I expected some understanding, or at least some empathy, but what I got was something completely different. Kevin immediately got defensive, saying that there must have been a reason for Mom to do that I was never home, that I always prioritized work over family. Brittany basically said the same thing, adding that Mom had been alone all those years while I was always at the office. And that's when I realized that Helen had been poisoning them against me probably for a long time, planting those seeds of resentment so that when this inevitably exploded, they would be on her side. I tried to explain to them that I worked so much precisely because of them, to give them a good life, to pay for their colleges, so they wouldn't have to worry about money, but they didn't care. In their heads, I was the villain, the absent father who had pushed their poor mother into another man's arms. Neither of them asked how I felt. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody seemed to care that after 25 years of marriage, my life was falling apart. They only cared about defending their mother and making me feel like everything was my fault. That dinner ended with Kevin and Brittany leaving furious with me, and from that day the relationship was basically destroyed. The following months were like living in a nightmare. I moved to a small apartment. I kept working, but it was like being on autopilot, functioning but not really being present. I tried to maintain contact with my kids, but they barely responded to my messages. Kevin blocked me on social media, and Brittany only answered me with monosyllables when I asked her how she was. The holidays passed, and neither of them wanted to spend time with me. They preferred to stay with Helen, and apparently with Lawrence too. Because it turns out she had introduced him to the kids as her new boyfriend almost immediately after the divorce, without waiting even a decent amount of time or anything. The final stab came like 2 years later when Brittany got engaged. She called me, the first time we had really talked in months, and I thought maybe she was finally ready to reconnect with me. But no. She called to tell me she was getting married, and that she had decided I wasn't invited to the wedding. I was literally speechless. I could only manage to ask why, and she told me it was because I had never been present in her life, that I didn't deserve to be at her special day, and that Lawrence, the guy who screwed her mother while I was working to pay for her education, was going to walk her down the aisle. That was what really broke me. Not the divorce, not Helen's betrayal, but my own daughter telling me that her mother's lover was more important to her than her own father. I hung up the phone, and I think I cried for the first time since everything had started. Not a soft cry, but those sobs that come from your chest and you can't control, like the crying of someone who finally accepts that they lost everything. Kevin did exactly the same thing when he got engaged like a year later. He didn't even call me. He sent me a text message, literally a text message, saying he was getting married and that I wasn't invited because Mom would be uncomfortable if I was there, and that he wanted his day to be perfect for her. For her, not for him, for his mom. At that point, I wasn't even surprised anymore. It just confirmed what I already knew, that I had completely lost my children and that I probably would never get them back. I blocked their numbers after that because honestly, I couldn't keep torturing myself waiting for them to someday realize what they had done. Fast forward like 8 years. 8 years where I basically became another person. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing I had left, and it turned out to be the best decision I could have made, even though at the time I was only doing it to not think. A coworker named Frank proposed that we start our own tech consulting company, and I thought, why not? I had nothing to lose. No family waiting for me at home, no obligation beyond paying rent on my apartment. We launched together, and it turns out we were good at this. Very good. The company started to grow. We got big contracts, we hired more people, and in a couple of years we were making more money than I had ever seen in my life working as an employee. With professional success also came some emotional stability. I started going to therapy, something I probably should have done from the beginning, and slowly I began to heal. Not completely, because there are wounds that never fully close, but enough to be able to function as a normal human being again. I met a woman at a tech conference. Monica was her name. She was a widow. Her husband had died in a car accident like 3 years before. We understood each other immediately because we had both lost our families in different ways, but equally painful. We started dating. We fell in love. And we got married like 2 years after meeting. With Monica, I had something I never had with Helen. A true partner who valued and supported me unconditionally. And then Amelia was born. Our daughter, who's now 5 years old and is literally the light of my life. For the first time in almost a decade, I felt really happy. Like I had finally left all that shit from the past behind and could focus on my new life, my new family, my new self. Everything was fine until like 3 months ago when the doorbell rang at my house on a Saturday morning. Monica and Amelia were at Monica's grandmother's house for the weekend, so I was alone. I opened the door and there were Kevin and Brittany, standing on my porch after 8 years without seeing or talking to them. I didn't even know how they had gotten my address because I had moved several times since the last time we had contact. For a second, one stupid and hopeful second, I thought that maybe they had finally come to apologize, to reconnect, to try to fix our relationship. But the way they looked at me, without smiles, without warmth, just with that uncomfortable expression of someone who needs something, let me know immediately that wasn't the case. They came in without me really inviting them, like they just walked past and sat down in the living room as if they had a right to be there. Kevin started talking, asking me how I'd been, commenting on the nice house I had, clearly making awkward small talk before getting to the real point of their visit. Brittany just looked around, probably evaluating how much money I had now. After like 10 minutes of forced conversation, Kevin finally dropped the truth. Turns out Lawrence, their mother's great love, the man who was more of a father to them than I supposedly was, had lost all his money. His landscaping company went bankrupt. He declared bankruptcy. And he had left Helen with huge debts before basically disappearing. Helen had had to sell the house, the same house I had left her in the divorce, and now she was living in a small apartment working as a cashier because she couldn't get a better job at her age. Kevin and Brittany were also going through financial difficulties. Surprise, surprise. Because apparently neither of them had done much with their lives after college. Kevin worked in sales making a pittance, and Brittany was an administrative assistant at some random office. And they both had kids now, like Kevin. Had 2, and Brittany had 1, and they were struggling to make ends meet. And there I was, thinking, and what the fuck do they expect me to do with all this information? because clearly they didn't come just to catch up after 8 years of silence. And sure enough, after telling me all their problems, Kevin asked me if I could help them financially. He didn't ask. He asked if I could, as if it was an obligation of mine because I'm their father and fathers supposedly help their children no matter what. I asked them why they thought I should help them after everything that had happened, after they completely excluded me from their lives, from their weddings, from meeting my grandchildren. Kevin got defensive, saying that I had always been the one who prioritized work and that they had only reacted to my emotional absence. Brittany added that Mom needed them more at that time and that I was clearly fine, looking around my house as if that justified everything. Neither of them apologized, actually like Prow. Neither admitted that maybe they had been wrong. They just wanted my money. Now that they realized Lawrence wasn't the rich hero they thought, and that I apparently did have money, I told them to leave, that I had nothing to give them, and not to come looking for me again. Kevin called me selfish, and Brittany started crying, saying she couldn't believe I was being so cruel to my own family. I threw them out of my house and locked the door, shaking with rage and pain again after years of having managed to leave it behind. I thought that would be the end. But a week later, they showed up at my office. My office, in the middle of the workday, interrupting an important meeting with a client. The receptionist let them in because they said they were my family, and it was an emergency, and there were Kevin and Brittany again. This time with their kids, my grandchildren I had never met, using them as emotional tools to try to soften me up. Kevin literally pushed his kids toward me, saying, "These are your grandchildren. Don't you want to meet them? Don't you want to be part of their lives?" And Brittany did the same with her kid, a girl about 3 years old who looked at me confused, not knowing who I was. I had to call security to get them out of my office because they wouldn't leave, and it was all a horrible scene in front of my client and my employees. I lost that contract, by the way. The client decided not to work with us after witnessing that family drama. 2 days later, I received a long email from Kevin, supposedly an apology, but when I read it, it was clear it wasn't sincere. It was one of those sorry, not sorry, where they basically admit they screwed up but immediately justify their actions and minimize your pain. The email ended with a business proposal. They wanted me to invest in some entrepreneurial idea they had, something about an app or I don't know what, promising that if I helped them financially, they would let me be part of my grandchildren's lives. They wanted to buy my love and my access to my grandchildren, literally put a price on family relationship. That was the last straw. I blocked their emails, blocked their numbers, told my office receptionist that if they showed up again to call the police, and cut off all contact completely. If in 8 years they hadn't learned anything and only came back when they needed money, then clearly they never cared about me as a father but only as a source of resources. Last week, Helen showed up at my door. Alone this time, without the kids. She looked worn out. Much older than someone 48 years old should look, with old clothes and the face of someone who hasn't slept well in months. She asked me if we could talk, and I almost closed the door in her face. But something made me let her in. She sat on the same couch where Kevin and Brittany had sat months before and started crying. She told me that Lawrence had left her when he lost his money, that he was only with her for the novelty and the ego of taking another man's wife, that as soon as things got difficult, he disappeared without looking back. She told me she had made the worst mistake of her life, that she should never have betrayed me, that I had been a good husband, and she didn't value it until she lost everything. That the kids finally realized that Lawrence was a fraud, but it was too late because I had blocked them all. She asked me for forgiveness, crying and saying she would do anything to go back and not ruin our family. And you know what? Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me wanted to be the kind of person who forgives and lets go of resentment. But another part, the stronger part, remembered everything I had lost because of her decisions. I remembered the nights crying alone in my apartment. I remembered my children telling me I wasn't welcome at their weddings. I remembered 8 years of loneliness and pain trying to rebuild my life from scratch. I remembered Lawrence walking my daughter down the Crowley aisle on the day that should have been my moment as a father. And I remembered Kevin and Brittany showing up at my door, not to reconnect, but to ask me for money. I told Helen that her apology came like a decade too late, that I was no longer the Christopher she knew, that I had a new life with a new family that truly loved me. I told her that she made her choice 10 years ago, and that now she had to live with the consequences of that choice, just like I had to live with them. I wished her luck and asked her to leave and never come back. I closed the door and watched her leave through the window, walking slowly toward an old beat-up car. I didn't feel satisfaction, but I didn't feel guilt either. I just felt peace, like I had finally closed that chapter of my life for real. That night, Monica came home with Amelia, and we had dinner together as a family, laughing and talking about Amelia's day at kindergarten. And that's when I realized that I didn't lose my family 10 years ago. I just lost people who never really valued me. My real family is here now. In this house, with the woman who loves me and the daughter who sees me as her hero. Sometimes things have to be completely destroyed so you can build something better in their place. And that's enough for me.